All right. Well, welcome everybody back to the Asheville Vedic Astrology YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology. Today I'm here with astrologers of the Carolinas. We've got Corey Dowds from South Carolina, Charleston area, ihavetheveda.com. We have Channing Ayers, who's here in Asheville with me. So we consider her also a part of Asheville Vedic Astrology. And what we're going to be doing today is looking at a chart of an individual who submitted their information for this very purpose. A while back on Facebook, I asked people to submit their birth information as well as questions, 2 questions, so that we would create their chart. And then the 3 of us would take some time to analyze those questions based on our pooled experience to see what we come up with together. We had an overwhelming show of support in this regard. I think last time I checked, we had over 50 people apply to be a part of this. We're only able to choose 5 so far. So we might do this more often if it goes well. And as I mentioned, we have 5 charts to look at, but we're going to do 1 chart at a time. So in this video, we're going to be looking at a Taurus Ascendant, specific to asking the question around his career, as well as asking questions around foreign settlement. So first of all, welcome Corey. Welcome, Channing. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Hey.
And yes, let's go ahead and see which questions we have for this chart. And just to check, I haven't shared my screen yet, right? You can just still see the 3 of us. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question we have for this chart is simply asking about profession, business or job, as well as foreign settlement. So I'm assuming they just want to know potentially the kinds of things that might be supportive of them in their career and their profession, what we see from the chart. And maybe we can look at it through dashas and transits as well to see when there might be some support there. And then we'll go ahead and look at foreign settlement for this particular video. So let me share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. So can you all see the screen now?
There it is.
All right. So we have a Taurus Ascendant with Jupiter in the Ascendant, Venus in an angle, Saturn in the 9th house, Mars in the 12th, Rahu in the 11th, Moon and Ketu in the 5th, and Mercury and Sun in the 8th. And for this question, we'll be looking at the Navamsha, we'll be looking at the Dasamsha and some of this other information we might be able to pull in here. So the question is, what kind of information can we give this individual dealing with their career, their vocation? And we'll go ahead and we'll start with Corey. So Corey, what are some of the immediate insights you see when you consider this chart about their career?
Okay, so right away, the Lagna shows the path that one is on and has a lot to do with one's career, your career path. A lot of people think it's just the 10th, but really the rising sign has a lot to do with it. So we see it's a Taurus rising, so that brings in the qualities of Venus, and that's about, it's really a sign of, working hard and acquiring your resources, but Venus makes one involved in luxury and beauty and entertainment and things like that. So, and also it's an earth sign, so maybe, business of some sort. And we see that the ruling planet is in the 7th, and that's also, that's a good place to have the ascendant lord, and it's in an angle. This is the house of trade and business, so perhaps something involving beauty or refinement or luxuries, trading, dealing with that sort of thing. That's vague, I know, but that can be a lot of things. And the Atmakaraka is Jupiter, which is also in a sign of Taurus as well. So we see a lot of improving life, making life good, even maybe that can be a lot of things, maybe something fashion or beauty oriented.
Right. Okay. And how about you, Channing? When you take a look at this chart, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I definitely like to look at the ascendant just to see the overall path and where that person's going and where they are. So I see that in the 7th. So there's definitely a connection with either foreign lands or public or something to do with other people because it's the 7th house. When I see that Venus there ruling Taurus, Saturn is aspecting it in its own home, ruling the 9th cusp, the 10th cusp, and the 11th cusp. Mars ruling the 7th cusp. Now I'm talking about Rashi aspects here. I just see all these houses connected to the potential for something public, maybe a political connection, diplomacy, could be some sort of luxury connection, but just something to do dealing with other people, as well as some factors that could be connected to education. You see Venus connected to education. You see the Atmakaraka, Jupiter can often be connected to education, children, counseling, and Jupiter is connected with Venus here in the Dasumsha, the D10.
Right.
So you do see a connection with Venus as students and Jupiter that can bring in some elements of this Jupiter and Venus together. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think all of that makes a lot of sense. With this idea of a really strong chart related to these two benefics, Jupiter and Venus, we see them in the ascendant, we see them on an angle in the 7th house. We can see that in the D10, as you mentioned, that Jupiter and Venus are together, and they are in the sign of Libra, and they are in the 7th house, which does speak to a few things. That might be Corey telling us why he just dropped off. Okay, but we'll get back to that in a minute.
Oh, Corey.
Yeah. So basically, we can see this focus on trade. We can see this focus on travel. And I do think that the whole aspect of education is strong there. And we have to remember, when we think about education, it doesn't always have to be like we think of it as being a high school teacher or professor, although that's a distinct possibility. Education can be anyone that trains other people, trains other individuals. So I think this is all pretty good when we consider that this is most likely to be a direction the person is going to go in. And we do see, when it comes to things like travel for the career, that we have the 10th Lord Saturn. The 10th Lord Saturn is doing pretty good in the 9th house. And the 10th Lord Saturn is getting aspected by the moon to 40 points out of 60. And the reason I'm looking at that is because the moon itself is the 3rd Lord. And so having the 3rd Lord aspecting the 10th Lord can do a few things. It could give things like short distance travel for one's work, but the 3rd Lord is also a planet that deals with speaking, giving presentations, seminars, and so on. And having that 3rd Lord in the 5th house can also show an individual who has a capacity to share their knowledge in this way. And it's falling in Virgo, which can give someone the capacity to be a problem solver, a troubleshooter. And the other reason I'm fixating on that is because we're going to have Jupiter, the Atmakaraka, in the Navamsha of Virgo, which is also a sign that tends to deal with troubleshooting and managing problems and improving situations. And we have Rashi aspects here from Mars to that Jupiter, which could bring in this capacity to engineer things in better ways, again, through communication, through teaching, and so on. So welcome back, Corey. I saw you dropped off there for a minute. Weather got the best.
I'm in the middle of Hurricane Irma, so it's,
okay.
I'm making it out again.
Well, just like the lizard that's hanging on your screen, you just keep hanging on. Yeah. Okay. So when we're looking at this chart, I think that everything that we've discussed, we all seem to be in agreement on it. One of the things I would like to point out, maybe you all can comment on this too, is that we do have a fairly strongly tenanted 8th house with this Mercury and Sun. So Mercury rules the 2nd, Mercury rules the 6th. The 2nd can deal with our resources, how we manage our resources. Excuse me, it's the 6th cusp, but it's the 5th house. The 5th house can also deal with our legacy and so on. And so we see that this Mercury and Sun fairly close together. This is one of the things that I think might be giving this person some potential confusion about what they want to be doing. Because anytime it falls within the 8th house, there will always be this sense of, is it going to break apart? Is it going to last? So what I think I would like to say to this individual is, knowing that there is this Jupiter and Venus on an angle, that's going to be very supportive to keep them on their path and give them lots of good fortune. And the Saturn, as they get older, particularly as they get into their later 30s and early 40s, they'll feel more stable on their path, because Saturn does better giving a person the capacity to feel like they're on purpose as they mature and as they age. So the person whose chart this is, keep that in mind. Do you all have any other comments about the career or insights like that?
You can also see that they're in a Rahu Dasha.
Right.
And so the Rahu Dasha itself is going to be a challenge just by the nature of Rahu. It's not necessarily as easy to find clarity with path. And Rahu is not necessarily on top of, but definitely connected to the 12th house Dasha. So there's definitely a hidden element when you get involved with the 12th house, things that aren't necessarily as on the surface. But that's what I was thinking when you were saying that there's potential, and Rahu's aspecting that Mercury and that Sun as well. So it's, that doesn't necessarily get as clear sometimes. You have to work a little bit. Mercury ruling things like management, and the Sun are inspirations. That can definitely be influenced by that Rahu aspect and that Ketu aspect there. So.
Right. And one thing we were discussing before we actually got into recording, Corey, you were mentioning the Atmakaraka being in the first house, and you were talking about being in charge of one's own. What were you saying there? Can you remember?
Well, it can sometimes make one have like a self-directed path, but at the same time, being in Rahu Dasha might almost make it not seem like very clear to you at this time either. But it makes one, kind of like more self-focused maybe, and thinking about their career. And career would obviously be important to them. But I would also agree that in Rahu Dasha, you're probably not going to have just one career, especially since this person's still young, I think it seems. But I do also notice that they have the only benefics in the angles yoga, that good yoga, where you tend to make money more off of goods or teaching maybe, or education, and not through hard work and toil so much. So I do see a lot of the educational type of things going on as well.
Good. And the other important point.
Sorry, did y'all say that while I got cut out?
Yeah, educational. No. Well,
we did talk about education quite a bit, yeah.
Okay.
So in regards to timing, again, I just want to be clear, and many of you know this is a tropical zodiac friendly channel, and those individuals who submitted their chart are aware that we do use the tropical zodiac with the sidereal nakshatras. And in that regard, from our perspective, Jupiter will be moving into Scorpio in October. Is that accurate? Did I say that? Yeah. Jupiter will be moving into Scorpio in October. And for this individual, since it's falling on their ascendant lord and it's in an angle, they might find that they are given more opportunities for their work, but also for travel during the year of Jupiter's transit. And the other important thing to remember for this individual is they're getting ready to go into a Saturn return. And that's going to begin late December, January of 2018, when tropically Saturn will be moving away from their Mercury, moving away from their Sun, and moving into the sign of tropical Capricorn. So they're going to have more opportunities, but along with it, I think they might find that they're going to get more responsibility, and they're going to have to work a little bit harder for what they're doing. All right. So I just wanted to point out those two transits. So with this chart, do you all have any other insights in mind about this person's career before we move on to their next question?
It does look like, I would like to say that it does look like there is sort of a lot of times we have more than one career. So she might, or if it's a she or a he, this person as like regular jobs, part-time jobs, might be involved in working in like Venusian things like retail or food service or things like that, like being just something involved in that sort of thing, even working at a grocery store or something like that. But then they also do have some more like beauty and fashion thing. Also, the 7th Lord is in the 12th, which is one of those yogas that can make one live by clothing. Or, like fashion designers sometimes have that yoga. But then I also see the educational stuff too, and we don't always just do one thing our whole life. So they might do both depending on dashes and transits and stuff like that. But I do agree that it looks like they're asking this at a good time because they're about to have a lot of opportunities coming when Jupiter transits this next year or 2 years.
Okay.
Saturn.
How about you, Channing? Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I just popped open the D7, the Saptamsha, just to check really quickly, which we don't have up here, but one of the techniques is to look at the Upapada as well as the Amakaraka in the D7, specifically for the career. And one of the things that did show up that we haven't, we're not really going deeply into the Gemini and the Padas and whatnot, but the moon is aspecting the Upapada in the D7. And in the D7, it's in the sign of Libra, which is Venus's sign. So both of those elements actually points to education pretty strongly. So, that's what I kind of, looking for a career, there's so many different techniques. You can sit there for a couple hours and really start pulling together. And what I look for are repetitions, things you start seeing over and over again that can kind of keep pointing you in the right direction. So it's kind of like a little Rubik's Cube that you have to sort of pick apart. But yeah.
Good. And the only final thought I have is I was just looking at the chart, and when we see, what I like to do when it comes to things like career is to take the 10th Lord or the 10th cusp Lord, whichever you prefer, and see where does it go within the D10. And again, seeing that Saturn is going into Virgo in the D10, and all the things we've discussed, I think are very valid for this individual. But with that Saturn being in Virgo, especially getting Rashi aspected by Saturn, as well as Sun and Mercury, I do think there's going to be quite a lot of emphasis on either problem solving or improving situations for other people. So, and that can be addressed in education, that can be addressed in numerous things, but I think that's going to be a consistent thread in this person's life. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to add one more thing. Now I'm almost thinking about health and nursing, or like I'm nourishing a medical, maybe even side, because so much Virgo's coming up, the career, the Swampsha's Virgo, and then Rahu's in Virgo. So maybe a tech-oriented career that deals with something having to do with, like problem solving or maybe health to some degree. But I wouldn't just throw that out there if I was doing a reading. I would probably look at a lot more. But did you guys think any of that too, or?
It came up, with all the Virgo influences, and I can kind of get the idea with the nursing having the seventh Lord. And nursing doesn't have to be nursing specifically; it's caring for someone else.
Or like hospice care or something. Yeah.
Right, in the seventh house. But I think that the initial things that we discussed are probably going to be a little more. They're going to make a little bit more sense for this person, but we'll find out when we get the feedback.
When you look in the Rashi chart, you do see the Mercury and Moon Rashi aspecting each other, as well as in the Amsha chart, which is a healing thing. So, I mean, if as soon as you start seeing Virgo repeat itself, which is very common in the healing profession, you also see Mercury and the Moon. Those are two things that can point to that too, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a nurse always, or Venus here is very nurturing, but education as well can include types of healing, So
if I was going to go the nursing thing, I would say this person would make a great what do they call those nurses that travel, like that they go somewhere for 3 months at a time? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I could see that.
Travel nurses, I don't know. But anyway, and so that'll take us to the next question. This person was asking about foreign settlement, foreign residence. So we'll go ahead and start with Channing on this one. So when you look at this chart and you consider the idea of foreign settlement or foreign residence, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the first house lord going into the seventh house seems like a pretty strong indicator that this person may want to travel, may want to interact with others, may want to possibly live in a foreign residence. Rahu also is connected with the 12th house cusp, so that can also connect people with foreign places and foreigners. And then the seventh lord, Mars, goes into the 12th house, so that as well is another let's say displacement from home, from moving someone into another foreign, faraway place. Mars is pretty strong in the chart too, so I think that's a strong pull, because that planet is in its own home, that it really can bring that in. Looking
Okay,
at
how about you, Corey? Any thoughts?
The Ascendant Lord being in the 7th, I have to agree, is a major strong placement for travel, but then it's also Rashi aspecting the 3rd and the 4th cusp in the 3rd house, and that those both can have to do with home and relocation and changing. And there was one other thing I saw too, the 9th. Yeah, the 9th house Lord and 9th cusp is strong, and the 9th particularly can have to do with traveling in other countries, because the 7th can be like other nations, and so the 3rd from the 7th is like moving around through other nations, and that seems like, yeah, like also like Channing said, that Saturn is quite strong too. So I think that the travel, I would feel a lot more confident about saying, yeah, this is very likely, and then again, when Jupiter, your Amakaraka, goes to the 7th house, that can make one travel as well. So perhaps in the next year, there will be some career type
in the
travel.
Chaturtamsha too, in the D4, which I don't think that we have up here.
Yeah, I don't have it up here, so go ahead and tell us about it.
Well, the D4 is an important one to look at as far as where we're going to live, and the Amakaraka is in the 7th house as well, in the sign of Aquarius. The Ascendant is in Leo. So that can definitely keep them connected to their homeland to some degree. But that the Amakaraka, and then, let's see, the 4th Lord, the 4th cusp Lord, Mars, is Rashi aspecting the Amakaraka with Venus. So that also can, Venus is the 3rd Lord. So the 3rd and 4th cusp, the 3rd and 4th cusp Lord, Rashi aspect in the Amakaraka in the 7th house can definitely indicate some connections to foreign.
So all of you who have your head spinning about what she just said there. So to sum it up, what is your final statement minus all the 3rd and 4th and cusps and all that stuff? What's your final statement on that, Channing?
Yes, they will most likely be connected and possibly live in foreign land. Yeah.
Great. All right. So my take on it, I pretty much agree with everything both of you have said. Personally, I would think that there will be a lot of connection to foreign lands, again, from the 1st Lord being in the 7th house, 7th Lord being in the 12th, just like they all said. My only thought would be that travel would be the big thing, whereas the relocation in a foreign land, I'm not necessarily so sure about that, because having the Saturn in the 9th house, and the Saturn is probably going to be aspecting this 3rd and 4th cusp here, which would make me think that they're probably going to have more of a home base, more than likely in a country similar to their own culture, so whatever culture they come from, but the travel would be prominent. So I've seen and worked with a lot of people. They ask me, am I going to be able to immigrate? Am I going to be able to move to this? This is something that comes up a lot for me in my practice. And this chart, I do see the potential there. So I wholeheartedly concur with that. But my thought might be that travel might be very important, but they might still remain either close to their land of birth or very close to a similar kind of culture as making it their home base.
I think you can see that with Leo as their ascendants in the Chaturtamsha as well, which also connects them with their homeland. Leo is the sign of the homeland. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So what Channing is saying there, we don't have this chart up, but she's talking about the Chaturtamsha, the D4, and what she's saying is that the ascendant in the D4 is in Leo, and Leo is a fixed sign, but it's also a sign that typically deals with the family of our ancestors that we come from. So. Okay, well, I think that was pretty clear. Before we conclude this particular little discussion, do you all have any other final thoughts before we conclude here today?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay, all right, good. Excuse me. Well, thank you all for tuning in. This is one chart down. We have 4 more to go, and those of you who want to know what we're going to be talking about next, we have questions about romantic relationships, another career question, life purpose question, another relationship question. Will I be famous? If you've watched my videos, you know what my response is going to be to that. Another, will I live overseas? And then an interesting question about being a pilot, a specific question about piloting. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Corey and Channing, for being here. And we'll see you soon with our next video.